At one point, Toys R Us wasn't just a toy store, it was the toy store, a company so dominant it helped define childhood for an entire generation.
Come with me to a place
you'll be glad that you did. There's so much more I want to store with Toys R Us kids. It's a magical land, so where else would you go? When everything's at Toys R Us
and prices are low.
it's new and hot, it's a toy they've got.
And the prices are hard to beat.
You can search the whole world, but Toys R Us kids know it's the one and only place to go.
More games, more toys, oh fun!
It's the world's biggest place, so let's go!
At one point, Toys R Us wasn't just a toy store, it was the toy store, a company so dominant it helped define childhood for an entire generation. Its stock climbed to about $45 a share, reflecting total confidence in its future. But just a few years later, it was taken private for $26, and not long after that, it was gone. So, what went wrong? Welcome, or hopefully welcome back to Reluctant Lessons, where businesses go wrong. There was a time when one store defined childhood. If you grew up in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s, chances are you remember walking through those sliding doors and entering what felt like a warehouse of imagination. Aisles stacked floor to ceiling with toys, bikes hanging overhead, video games locked behind glass. Toys R Us wasn't just a place to buy toys, it was the destination. But the story didn't begin with massive stores and endless aisles. It began in 1948 with Charles Lazarus, a World War II veteran who owned a small baby furniture store in Washington, D.C. He noticed something simple but powerful. Parents came in once to buy furniture, but they kept coming back for toys. Furniture was a one-time purchase. Toys created repeat customers. So he pivoted away from furniture and toward toys, and in 1957 opened what was essentially the first toy supermarket. At the time, toy sales were fragmented across small shops and department stores. Lazarus introduced scale, high volume, wide selection, and competitive pricing, and it worked. Through the 1980s and 90s, Toys R Us became the dominant force in toy retail. Revenue climbed past $11 billion. Stores expanded globally, and the company defined the category. For many families, it wasn't just where you bought toys, it was part of childhood itself, and the stock reflected that dominance. After going public in 1978, the company delivered steady, predictable growth, eventually peaking at approximately $45 per share in the early to mid-1990s. The market believed in its future, but beneath that success, the foundation was beginning to shift. The first major turning point came in 1994 when Charles Lazarus stepped down as CEO. Founders leaving is normal, but what often leaves with them is less visible. Lazarus built the company around customer behavior, repeat visits driven by constant demand. After he stepped away, leadership began managing something different: competition. By the late 1990s, something unthinkable happened. Walmart surpassed Toys R Us in toy sales. And for the first time, Toys R Us was no longer defining the market. It was competing inside it. Leadership recognized problems and attempted to respond. Around 2000, major efforts were launched to remodel stores and modernize the experience. But these initiatives were expensive, slow, and incomplete. While Toys R Us was trying to fix the physical store, the market itself was already moving beyond it. At the same time, another critical decision was made. Instead of building its own e-commerce platform, Toys R Us partnered with Amazon. It seemed efficient, but it meant outsourcing the capability that would soon define retail. Amazon learned the toy business, expanded its marketplace, and eventually became a direct competitor. Inside the stores, the experience continued to decline. What once felt exciting began to feel outdated. Lighting was harsh, fixtures were aging, layouts were cluttered, and inventory was inconsistent. Customers encountered empty shelves for high-demand items and excess stock for slower-moving products. Staffing was limited, and even simple purchases required waiting. What had been an experience became friction. Behind the scenes, Toys R Us continued to exert pressure on its suppliers. Even companies like Mattel and Hasbro had to navigate pricing demands and promotional expectations. Smaller vendors faced even greater risk, often paying for shelf space and absorbing losses on unsold inventory, particularly after the holiday season. For years, this system worked because Toys R Us controlled the ecosystem. But by 2004, the strain was visible. Leadership even considered exiting the toy business entirely, a remarkable moment for a company that had defined the category. That was not a strategy shift, it was a warning. In 2005, Toys R Us was taken private by Bain Capital and KKR at approximately $26 per share. Down from its earlier peak near $45, the valuation reflected a clear shift in confidence. The deal also introduced roughly $5 billion in debt, fundamentally changing the company's trajectory. From that point forward, the company was no longer optimizing for growth. It was managing financial constraints. Hundreds of millions of dollars in annual interest payments limited its ability to invest in stores, technology, and logistics. At the exact moment when the retail landscape was evolving rapidly, Toys R Us had the least flexibility to respond. The decline was gradual, not sudden. Revenue eroded, traffic declined, margins tightened, and the overall experience continued to lag behind competitors. Without the ability to reinvest at scale, the gap widened even further.
Hey, Fox Business Alert for you. Breaking overnight. Toys R Us filing for bankruptcy.
Can you believe that?
By 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy, and in 2018,
the big story tonight, the end of an era.
Toys R Us set to close all of its stores. The impact is going to be felt nationwide. The iconic chain's 740 stores will shut down. 30,000 jobs will be lost.
it liquidated its U.S. operations. This is not simply a story about toys or retail. It's a story about how companies evolve over time. The founder built the business around customers. The next generation managed competition. The final phase was constrained by debt. The stock tells the same story. It peaked at around $45 when dominance felt certain. It exited public markets at $26 when that certainty began to fade. And after that, the story disappeared from public view. Success can carry a company for decades, but it can also create the illusion that change is not urgent, until it is. And by the time that becomes clear, it's often too late. If you enjoyed this episode of Reluctant Lessons, where businesses go wrong, there's more coming, because the pattern is always the same. Success leaves clues, but so does failure. As I mentioned, we have more Reluctant Lessons coming your way. Radio Shack, WeWork, Polaroid, and so many more. There's no shortage, so be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. And remember this, success leaves clues, but failure leaves lessons, if you're willing to see them. Thanks so much for being here. I truly appreciate you. I'll see you again on the next Reluctant Lessons.